Okay, so we're graphing the function f of x equals 3x plus 2 in the domain minus 3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. Okay, so the first thing that we know by looking at this equation or function is that it's a linear equation. The reason we know this is because the highest power of x is x, meaning that there's no x squared or there's no x cubed or there's no x to the power of 4, it's just x. What do we know about linear equations? When we graph them, we know that they're graphed as a line. So I think that's pretty simple. Okay, so we know that when we graph this function, it should look like a line. Okay, so then the domain part, so it talks about minus 3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. So this is our start and our end point, okay? What do we know about linear functions or linear equations when we draw them? We know that we only need to plot the first and the last point. And this is because it's a line, so if we were, so I'll just do a little diagram here really roughly. If we were to do the first plot and the last point, okay? If we drew our line, now granted that's not going to be straight, but if we drew our line between them 2 points, that's going to be the exact same as if we were to do a point in between each of them and drew a line. Is that okay? I know that's not a very good example, but for linear equations you only need to plot your first and your last point. If you plot all the points in between, that's okay, because you are still going to get your full marks. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. Okay, so we need to graph it in the domain of minus 3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. Okay, so we know that that's our points between minus 3 and 3. You're going to need minus 3, minus 2, minus 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. We said we only have to plot our first and our last, so our first will be minus 3, our last will be 3. We don't have to plot every point in between. The x in the middle there is a really big clue to us, because that means we're going to let x equal to minus 3 and we're going to let x equal to 3, because all these coordinates here are x, if that's okay. Right, so looking at the function, so we figured out what it's going to look like. We know what inputs we're going to use for our x. Now we actually have to just input them into the function. So our equation that they gave us was f of x, and we all know that f of x actually means y at this stage. So f of x equals 3x plus 2. Right, so instead of x we're going to have minus 3. So we're letting x equal to minus 3 for the first point. So f of minus 3 is equal to 3 on minus 3 plus 2. So we know f of minus 3, or f of minus 3 means y in this case, so y is equal to minus 9 plus 2, which will give you minus 7. So what point will that give us? Well, we know that we let x equals minus 3, so it's minus 3 point, and we found that y equals minus 7. So the point is minus 3 minus 7. So that's our starting point of our line. Then our last points, so we can just pick our last one. We said x is equal to 3 for our last point. Remember over here. So f of, just stick it in this box over here. F of 3 equals 3, and this time we're going to sub in 3 for x. I'll just write the equation first so you know where it's coming from. F of x equals to 3x plus 2. So f of 3 is equal to 3 on 3 plus 2. So f of 3 is equal to 9 plus 2, which will give us 11. So we know our x point was 3, and now we found our y point was 11, so the point 3, 11. So we'll plot these on our graph now. We just highlight the points so they stand out to us. So, granted we can't really see this graph perfectly, or we can't input perfectly, but you'll get the overall idea, right? So minus 3, minus 7. So minus 3 on the x-axis, minus 7 on the y. So that's going to be minus 3, minus 7. So plot our point there. And label your point when you plot it. Okay, and then what about 3, 11, so our endpoint, so 3 on the x-axis here, 11 actually doesn't exist, so we'll just draw it in, 3, 11, so all the way up to here. So that's our starting point of our line and our end point of our line. So now what we'll do is we'll insert the line. So you'll just be doing this with your ruler, so it's pretty easy. Perfect. So there we have it, we've drawn the point. Now my line might be a little bit off, but it's just because I can't use a ruler. It'll work a lot better for you. So we've graphed the function f of x is equal to 3x plus 2 in the domain minus 3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3.